low carb, keto, protein. These weren't buzzwords in India back in 2019. Yet, Sudarshan took the leap of faith and launched his venture, Low Foods, to create what he calls functional foods for India. I'm talking about things like this atta packet right here, or even the everyday bread. Maybe even everyday Indian snacks like the murka or mixture. Things that Indians eat practically every single day. These products were clinically tested to reduce insulin spikes and are actually healthy to eat. So we visited Sudarshan at Low Foods' brand new manufacturing facility in Bengaluru to understand the business and his philosophy as an entrepreneur. We dive into why the Low Foods pitch deck was rated one of the best by the Rainmatter team, how to build a brand in a world of quick commerce, why he launched a cloud kitchen, and a whole lot more. So let's dive in. So Sudarshan, I've got something special for you, your pitch deck. And I have this on the iPad because Dinesh, who leads investments at Rainmatter, he put out this post internally and I think on LinkedIn as well, right? Saying it's one of the best pitch decks that he has seen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, take you back to whenever this was created, because I'm sure founders want to know, right? What goes into making a pitch deck? The structure, what makes a VC look at it and go, wow,
Yeah.
this is the best thing that I've seen. Also, what do you leave out of it? And I've got it for you, so you can take it from me and tell me what went through your mind when you were making this.
All right. So this is a blast from the past, and I need to revise this first of all. It's interesting because I made this around 1.5 years or a little over that back. It's good to see how things have progressed since then. See, I'll tell you the way to think about it is key. One is you'll find enough and more people talking about how to make pitch decks, right? And Sequoia has a very famous thing where they talk about what should each slide contain. I think it's an air. Typically, they recommend that it should be 10 slides, tops 8 to 10 slides. Mine's is about, mine's is 25 plus. Yeah. If you include the appendix, it's 30 plus. So A, that's where it doesn't follow the charter. Second is, see, if you look at the traditional VC pitch decks, they should ideally follow that format, which is the 8 to 10. And usually that is meant for very quick elevator pitches. You know, in 10 minutes, the person in front should be interested enough that then he starts to go deep. So they're built for that format, which makes a lot of sense. You know, you come in, you'll have an initial slide in terms of the problem statement of the consumer. Then you'll have a slide on, you know, how is it that it can be solved. One slide on how is it that you are solving. One slide on how big hence is the TAM and the problem statement. And then you'll have a slide in terms of, you know, your own team. Why is it that you can solve this better? And then finally, I'd think about how much money you need and consequently, where can the company go in the next 1 year with the fundraise and then in the next 5 years from an overall picture perspective. So that's usually the thing. If it's tight enough, if it's relevant enough, that's from there is where, you know, investors will take it forward. And I would recommend that you should make like that. However, it usually doesn't work in 2 or 3 different situations. One of the key situations is when you're actually looking to build a category, right? So I'll give you a, you know, when we were beginning this presentation and, you know, I had to first explain to people what is functional food. And the reason why that was the case is because most people mixed it up with healthier for you or health food. And health food is such an absolutely misused and abused term that there is no way for people to differentiate ourselves. So initially, I first begin by explaining what is functional foods. Okay. And I think that's probably why they really liked it, because I think all of them were engineers and, you know, okay, first let us start by the concept and theory behind what it is.
So what is a functional food?
So the function foods are foods that are nutritionally calibrated. So one is healthier for you, which means, which is what traditional healthier for you foods is, which is either no palm oil or baked or roasted, those kind of things, right?
So which is not fried.
So which is you remove the bad part. That's one way to think about it, right? Functional foods, however, are that is of course there, which is the bad part is removed, but they are built for specific health conditions, which is why it's functional health food related. So in our case, for example, we have a product line specifically for diabetics, right? They are built, designed for a diabetic, keeping in mind diabetes as a condition. So we are not like a regular, you know, low GI, high fiber, diabetic friendly. We've actually run 2 human clinical trials. We have 2 human clinical trials run that establish that our products, the diabetic range, have between 50 to 70% lower sugar spike compared to a regular food product.
Right.
Now, there were many diabetic food products, including the big companies also, but nobody had really approached and built a product that was building it as per sugar spikes.
Got it.
Because fundamentally, diabetes is all about that, right? Your body is intolerant, cannot handle carbohydrates. So you eat something, your sugar levels rise. So then how do you bring it down, right? So then you would take medication, and all the solutions are built around that. We said, what if the food that you're eating itself leads to a much lower sugar spike?
Right.
Then the need for medication and the amount of medication we require comes down significantly. That's the way we approached. And which is why we said, okay, this is the condition, what's the core problem? And then we said, okay, hence the formulation needs to be built in a manner that it cuts down the sugar spike by 50 to 70%. So we first explained what is a functional food, right? And then we spoke about India is the lifestyle disease capital of the world, right? So people talk about, we have diabetes, we have protein, we have gluten, we have hypertension, we have cardiac, we have renal, we have retinal. All of these are there, right? So what we explained was, India is the lifestyle disease capital of the world. So we're not in the preventive space. I mean, of course, prevention is one part, but today these are very large problem statements, right? So can there be a food that helps address consumers who are already going through this lifestyle issues?
Got it.
And that's how then we said, okay, look, if this is the problem, this is a solution, and this is where we come into play. So we went through that process, explained, and then we explained why our products are technically built, and then why is it that, we believe that we can, this has a place in the universe and in the Indian ecosystem. And I think that's really what helped them really understand, rather than a typical deck where, you'll just have these stamp, because then everyone will have a question, no, but this segment, this consumer, this behavior. We said, leave that aside. There is a very large problem statement, which is, all of these lifestyle diseases are 50 million, 100 million plus people in India.
That's your opening one, right? Functional foods for 100 million.
For 100. So that's actually something which is, 6 years back when I started, this still remains true. So that opening slide, the opening statement still remains true. When I started the company, we were very clear that we are building for creating a impact on health at scale.
Right.
That is something that we were very clear upon. Of course, what we started off with and today where we are very different paths, but the North Star still remains the same, which is functional foods for 100 million Indians.
Got it. So what did you leave out of it? Because I'm imagining that what you put in
Yeah.
and what you leave out is equally as important as what you put in.
What I wanted to leave out was typically what VCs and our investment bankers also used to say, how big a business will this be 3 years from now? Show that it is 500 crores, 1,000 crores. I have been forced to keep it, but I've kept it in a very diluted form, because my view was that, look, the business is so dynamic, the world is so dynamic. Honestly, if you were to ask me, I can make a slide. I come from an analytics background.
Right.
I can make you a unicorn valuation also. I can make you, I mean, you tell me what number you want. I can build a very realistic Excel file that can prove that. But the reality is that, when you're building a category, right, and when you're building, it's not that this market was there that I had to, it's already a 10,000 crore market, and I'm saying, give me money, I'll do a massive ad campaign, I have a differentiated product, and I'll become a 500 crore business in the next 2 years. The reality is it was never going to be that. And I would say that upfront to, even within that point of time, or Dilip at that point of time, or any investor who has been with us, that this is a long game. This is a 5-10 year project. This is, if you're expecting that this is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, this is not the company that you should be betting on. I mean, that's why go ahead and bet on the protein powders or the bars, because that's a market that's already there, right? And it's already big. But we are somewhere, the market is going to take time to catch up. The market is going to be built, but it will definitively get built. That was something that I was very convinced upon. And I think that's got validated now. It's taken probably a couple of years longer than I thought it will take. I was thinking it will take 3 to 4 years. It ended taking probably 5 to 6 years. But that was very clear that market will catch up, because fundamentally we knew what we were building, and we knew that this is where it will evolve, because this is the only way to solve this problem statement. And I think that's where, having patient capital and the right investors really helped us, because, they believed in the larger, longer, what we were trying to do. And, but that's something which I really hate, truly, 3 years, 5 years from now, show that you're a 1,000 crore company. Honestly, I don't like doing that, but, and that's something which I think in this version probably have avoided that.
I think it's an afterthought. It's there, I think.
Yeah, it's probably as a close to the because, yeah. Now that is where you differentiate yourself, and that's where the choice of investor who connects with the pitch deck changes, right? Because the same pitch deck turns off a lot of the traditional investors, which I understand. But investors who connect with this also, where it's a combination of an impact and a purpose and a size of market and financial. So I think that automatically auto selects somewhere at this part. So which is why Sequoia never called it the best investment deck they've seen. But
Someone
but someone did.
That's a winner, yes.
Yeah.
But how does the CMO, former CMO of Ola Cabs,
Yeah.
end up doing all of this? And we are at your newest facility in Bangalore, so congratulations on this.
Thank you.
How does someone with your marketing background end up doing functional foods? What's the story there, Sudarshan?
So the journey has been in multiple parts. You spoke about the CMO journey, but if I were to tell you that I was also in the government for some time, as in the Aadhaar project with Mr. Nandan Nilekani when he was starting off. And then I was in the analytics space also, and I was in a traditional Asian paint, selling paints to dealers as well.
That was right after your
Right after my college, right? So in that sense, the journey seems very, very disparate. And at one level, it's probably because nobody found me employable as well. That I decided, let me just build something of my own. But jokes apart, see, the core thing that has held together is the fact that I'm a marketing person. I like consumer. I like to understand consumer and build something for the consumer. That's, I think, core and fundamental. Which is why I did a sales marketing job after campus. I did a marketing analytics job. So I worked with, went to Cincinnati, Procter & Gamble, which is the mecca of consumer businesses worldwide. Worked with the brand and the CMK teams in Cincinnati, global headquarters. Came back, and even in the Aadhaar project, the UID project, I was responsible for the communication part. So I kind of helped build the entire BI and analytics infrastructure for the Aadhaar project. And after that, I joined. E-commerce was starting off, so and digital marketing was starting off, and so I joined again a startup that got eventually sold out, heading their marketing and analytics, and then Ola was starting off at that time. Cabs was coming up, and then I joined there as CMO there. So again, core thing has been marketing, consumer, building consumer brands, even if it's in the government setup or in a private setup. So in that sense, being part of building consumer brands in different industries, and so in that sense, the journey has been consistent. And
that's what you make yourself believe.
yes, at least that's how I believe. There is some thread to the madness. But yeah, I mean that's core. And from there, I was always in. So after Ola, the thing was, I was very clear that I wanted to start something on my own. The question wasn't what.
Always? Like you always had that itch?
No, actually, I did not. But I think for almost 8 to 9 years, I was working with startups.
Right.
Even UID, I considered a startup because we were 15 people when I joined. So I still think about it as a startup. So, for me, the idea was to build, was working closely, built out multiple brands and industries. And so the thing was that, after Ola decided that let me try something on my own. The question wasn't what. I think two things happened. One is wanted to build something that could scale.
Okay.
And second is, I think because of Mr. Nilekani and the other project, also wanted to build something that can create an impact.
Okay.
And then I was generally into health, fitness, and so that's how then I got into this space. And I started off with another company called Lean Science, with a co-founder of mine, which was in the whole diet, fat loss consulting space. This was in 2017-18, and we were fairly ahead of, we were doing a lot of things which today have become more mainstream, but we were doing a lot of things, we were pioneering a lot of stuff, I think, which was fairly new at that point of time. Today people talk about diabetes reversal and their company about that. We were doing that at that point of time.
You left Ola when you were doing this. You had gone all in.
Yeah, I gone all in. All in. So I think all of those kind of helped to build out my own knowledge base in terms of health, fitness, and in that process is when I realized that, like I said, India lifestyle disease is a huge problem statement. Today, of course, again, a lot of people talk about that. But at that point of time, I could see that, fundamentally, and they trace back to the fact that we, like I said, over-index on carbohydrates and under-index on protein. And which is why I said, look, I can build, and we built a nice boutique business, 2 people with one more person and 3 people, fantastic lifestyle business. But that was too early for me to retire. So, so which is why I said, look, I can do something which can solve this at scale, and realize also that food is the probably 70-80% of all these issues that we talk about. So, and really there was no food that was approaching it scientifically in terms of if these are the conditions, what is it required, what are the kind of macros and how the food needs to be constructed to be able to do that. And also a lot of the foods that were there were all copies of the West. I mean, today also if you see, most of the functional foods are basically, Western food formats that are being copied, right? Bars, powders, cereal, mueslis. Cereal muesli, I mean, that's now becoming mainstream for the new generation. But if you look at it, Indian foods were not being made functional, so to speak, leave aside healthy. So I was very clear that I wanted to build something that starts from staples, center of plate, and then work upwards.
So this is because, sorry, this is because you were advising people on nutrition and you're like, what do I actually recommend to them that makes sense to their lifestyle and diet?
I was for the 1 or 2 months they could do it, but when I would see them, they could never adopt the new form factors in the long term, right? So I realized that again, this is part of the consumer play, that behavior that if you want to build something that becomes a habit, you have to work within the existing consumer behavior, right? I mean, today again, everyone now understands and talks about that, but the core fundamental shift was that uh, trying to give them a new food habit was not going to work from a long-term perspective. You have to build a food that works within their existing food habits, which is why we went after the atta, we went after Indian snacks, Indian biscuits, Indian biscuit form factors and flavors.
Like what?
Uh, Butter cookies, almond cookies, good day ka. That is what people were used to, right? So, for example, when
So you went after the snacking market.
flour. So our first product was flour, because snacking again is, if you look at it, you let's assume you eat say 400 grams of food, right? Snacks ends up being barely 40 to 50 grams of that. You're barely 15 to 20% tops of your entire food volume comes from snacking. Your most of the food volume comes from staples.
Right.
And staples in India is built in four broad form factors. You have flours, attas, you have rice, you have bread, and you have dairy. Right? These four technically are staples which contribute 70 to 80% of the volume of the food that you have.
Right.
So if you want to really, when companies, brands, or founders talk about, no, I want to create an impact, right? Unless you go after these, you can create a product that is great, but it will not impact from a lifestyle perspective.
The scale that you were talking.
Yes, and because remember, I am building something for lifestyle conditions, health conditions. Now, if my purpose is to impact a health condition, I cannot impact a health condition by having him eat a cookie at 4 p.m. and then say, his health condition will get impacted. Which is why traditionally we've always had a full portfolio play, because otherwise you can't expect to impact the health of someone.
So the first product was flour.
Flour, cookies, snacks, all the three together. Right? But flour is not just the roti flour. For us, flour is anything that forms a base for snack or cookies. So if you look at cookies also, it's made with a base flour. If you look at snacks also, it's made with a base flour. So when I say flour, it is fundamentally the base flour. It could be for a roti, it could be for a snack, it could be for a cookie. And that's what really truly makes the entire thing.
Got it. I noticed one, I think I am interview or something. It was a written one that you had done a couple of years ago, where you'd said something from your personal experience that you want to pass on to aspiring entrepreneurs. That was a message you were giving out. And you were saying always do your research upfront. Make sure the market is large enough, not just in terms of size of the market, but also their ability to pay for the price point that you are going after, right? You talk about great ideas, fantastic products, but often they come with limited market size, right? How did you validate that, listen, there is a large enough market for me to leave my comfortable boutique advisory and take a plunge into manufacturing actual food?
So I'm sure this interview came 2 years after I started this, because I did not do that, and that's why it was a important, thing to people that.
This was 2023.
Yes, so 3 years after we launched, right? Because we learned it the hard way. So the validation was almost going bankrupt. So that was a validation. Because what happens is, at that point of time, like I said, fundamentally the product was great. The problem statement was large enough. The product was the right solution for it, but the market wasn't ready for it, right? So, and as startups, either you need to have enough money and enough patience that you can ride and spend 3, 4, 5 years to educate and create the market,
Right.
Or better still, then you go where the market is already large enough, and then you can get some adjacency out of that.
Okay.
Uh, and that's really where we, I think, went wrong with the first product line. We launched the very low carb product line.
Right.
The expectation was that it had become very large in the US, and India, it had begun to pick up very rapidly.
This is the keto diet based.
Yeah, the keto and the very low carb diet. It had begun to pick up in India also rapidly at that point of time, 2019 or so. So the expectation was, it'll continue to pick up because it had become a multi-billion-dollar industry in the US before that. But early 2020, COVID happened, and the market also, again, given India is India, it did not really pan out the way we were thinking it will pan out. And then, of course, COVID happened, and what interestingly happened was that one of the biggest comorbidity during COVID was diabetes, right?
Sure.
And I think what happened for a diabetics to start adopting low carb products would typically have been a 5-10 year journey. That got compressed to 1.5 years. Till pre-COVID, I think diabetes was just considered okay, you have to live with diabetes, right? I've got diabetes, I'll take medication, I'll be a little conservative, and I'll live with diabetes. So I think post-COVID, what happened was diabetics started to realize that, look, they cannot just live with this because this is a life-threatening rather than just a disease that has to be managed. And I think that was a big shift, and that's why people started to actively look for solutions. And we realized that our keto line was getting adopted by diabetics because people who are on insulin or who are on extreme type 2 diabetes with high level of medication, they started to get advice that please cut down the amount of carbs that you have, and they were gravitating towards our products.
Where were they seeing your product, Sudarshan?
They were just searching for it and finding it online.
Oh.
Yeah. And from there is when we then launched a diabetic range. And then as the diabetic range started to get launched, and then that's when we realized that diabetes is a very large segment. It is now beginning to actively look for solutions. And, hence our product should land there.
Right.
And that's where we launched a diabetic range. And we got it wrong. because the diabetic consumers did not move fast enough. So obviously, I think it's moving, but it's moving at a certain pace.
So you're saying the timeline got compressed, but it still wasn't large enough for
Wasn't fast enough. The other thing that happened was, again, this goes back to being taught by the consumer, is that diabetics are usually 45 and 50 plus, right? And they are creatures of habit, right? So for them, their home cooked food is sacrosanct, right? And their ability to adopt new food products is very less. So that's the other part that, which comes...
your willingness.
Willingness, sorry. Right? And that's where the second part of that insight and wisdom comes into it, which is that they have to be willing to be able to adopt and try out a new product. Just having a large market that has the need for it doesn't translate into a market sizing. They need to be willing to make that switch. And that's where you have to find the right consumer insight and the right pain point for which they are willing to make that switch. And what we realized was diabetics, as much as they saw the need for it, they solved it mostly by cutting down the sugars that they were already having rather than adopt a low-carb product line.
Got it. So the tea would see a sugar-free edition, things like that, right? But
that is one part of it. Or they just started to stop sweets. Where they would have sweets after every meal, they would probably have once in a week or whatever. But again, extreme diabetics and insulin people were still looking for these products because they were medically advised. So unless you have a medical person saying ki yaar ye karna hi hai,
right,
it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
But that's where I think the protein wave started to pick up end of 2023. And we had a side product line, and I think the running joke in our team is that anytime I decide to shut down a product, it starts to pick up. So that's a running joke. In fact, at that point of time, I remember we were looking to shut down the product, Protein Chef, our brand, because I said, look, diabetes is a big focus and let's focus on that. And it started to pick up. And today, the Protein Chef line is obviously very large and a very large brand as well. But what we realized was that there were three things that happened simultaneously. And I think that's the third part, which I did not talk about it at that point in time, which is distribution. Without distribution, nothing works.
Right.
And especially in consumer goods, food even more so. Food is a 20, 30, 50, 100 rupee price point product. The greatest products can never sell the bane will be distribution. You need to have a distribution that can sell products at that price point profitably.
Right.
And which is why even the greatest of the largest of the companies fail unless and the only reason in fact they are able to still go continue is because they have distribution with them.
Got it.
And I think that's three things came together at that point of time. One is the consumer side tailwind because the consumer started to seek the product. Second, there's a lot of awareness that came post-COVID, which is in terms of protein became a key signal for health. So people started to associate that they have to increase the amount of protein.
Right.
Right. So the consumer side, A, got more aware of the need for protein.
Right.
B, that age band was such that they were willing to explore and try new products that which was a 25, in fact, not even 25, 20 to 35 age band.
Right.
We are a lot more willing to try out new products. And the third most important thing unlock was quick commerce and distribution, right? And that distribution unlock that happened brought all the three things together. So consumers wanting to explore a product and within 10 minutes getting that product,
Yeah.
trying it, and if they like it, they continue to buy it again and again. I think those are the three things that are required at any point of time. A large enough market and a consumer who's willing to pay for a product for that need. And third, a distribution that can support that.
Got it. I want to ask you about distribution later, but there are quite a few things you mentioned in this which I want to go back. First one being almost bankrupt. What happened? Because I think you had a LinkedIn post also which said that our bank balance went to zero thrice in the
I
last
was going to say it wasn't the first time, it was 3 times.
5.5 years, right? I would panic all night on how to pay salaries. You would talk to your finance manager. My question is, how do you know when it's worth putting? There's this theory, right? You don't put good money after bad. I'm assuming that when you go bankrupt 3 times, I can't imagine that. But how do you know that it's worth putting money back in again and trying to live the fight another day? As a founder,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that? Hey, this is my product, this is my baby, I know it'll work.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that ego versus knowing that business it makes sense?
Very I mean, there are many answers to this. At a founder level, I think it's very straightforward. I think all founders are driven by passion, driven by zeal and a need to do something. But when do you continue to do that after having been close to bankruptcy, right? Because I think the constant thing and people who have come from very strong backgrounds, good colleges, good careers, is the opportunity cost always, right? Because in the end, it comes down to think, yeah, why am I doing all this? Yeah, I can as well just go to a corporate and I will make. Even today, I believe if I was in a corporate, I would have made a lot more, right? But I think that's where it comes down to why you started this in the first place, and at even more core level comes down to purpose, right? And which is why uh, the founders that who outlive or outlast are either the ones who got a PMF very quickly and have a lot of money, or the most resilient ones are the ones who have a deeper reason why they did it. Like I said, I started the company because we wanted to create impact at scale, right?
Yeah.
And fundamentally, that belief it never went away, right? Because I knew ki the 100 million diabetics are still there. The 100 million people who are protein deficient are still there. The 50 million people who are cardiac patients are still there. And cutting down carbs, increasing protein fundamentally is needed, irrespective of whether I do it or not.
Fair.
Right? And that needs to be done because otherwise this cannot be solved through medication, right? I mean, medication alone, there's enough pharma doing that. But so, and just the thing that I want to do something which can create impact, right? I mean, in the end, if you have to do something, might as well do that. So that is what finally kept just alive. Ki, yaar, let's see if we can just solve for this, fight it out, because you build something that eventually will catalyze into something much larger.
Right.
So as founders, we are irrational any which ways, irrational and irrationally optimistic. So we have to be right. So वो तो है कि नहीं यार, it's okay. अगले साल we will crack it. It's just a matter of 2-3 months, right? Which also became tougher on some days. As my bank balance also went to zero. One is the company's bank balance went to zero, but obviously for 3 months I was putting from mine. And I remember once even my bank balance also went to
Right.
zero. So obviously those.
But you need an ecosystem as well, right?
Yeah, so that's where I think the investors also come into play, because then I can be all this, right? And I can then finally fold up and walk out, right? But then you also need someone who looks at, I mean, our investors who were coming in knew that, what situation we were in, or even our existing investors, right? I think, somewhere they also need to see that and believe in this, because finally for them, they're not running or building this. It's not, they just, in fact, most of them were angel investors or family offices, and they were just putting in money. At one level, they're not doing it for charity. Like,
Yeah.
they were still putting it. But I think credit to them in terms of what they saw, because, obviously anyone, if I was to put in money on myself, I would be like, boss, I don't know, this, they're almost out of money, and I don't know where this will go.
But you still have to go and convince them, right?
Yes. So I think, of course, and that's where I think conviction came, just because I think somewhere they saw what we were doing. I think that part, which is why if you look at my pitch deck, I'm sure if people look at the pitch deck and they'll be wondering, what is there about this pitch deck? I mean, if you look at it, this pitch deck is if you read through it, you'll wonder, हाँ वो सब ठीक है, but really the best ever and all that doesn't.
We put it up on screen so we can be the judge of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this pitch deck in isolation will look very average, but this pitch deck when I'm speaking through that will look very different.
I should have asked you to. I should have asked you to pitch instead of.
Will feel very different, and that's because it comes from a conviction and it comes from a purpose, and that's when I speak this thing, and when people see that I have lived through whatever, and build this out, and they will. I think there are enough people who see that and say that come what may, we will. And I think it finally people back the founder.
Got it.
If they believe that. If they believe that the founder is, I think they finally they just back the founder.
They backed you.
Which puts a lot more pressure. I mean, if it was just a financial investment, I would have been so much more happier. There is a certain level of disconnect. There is a multiplier, all that. But I think most people were backing the purpose and the founder, and which puts a lot more pressure. I think I wish it was just purely a financial transactions. As much as all of them keep saying, don't take pressure. We are investing in this as a purely financial thing. Whether it goes or not, don't worry about it. But I think we're all built in a certain way. So,
of course, well, got it. So let's talk about the brand now a little bit more, Sudarshan, right? We have at the back over here a lot of the brands that you have. And I'm seeing Keto Smart, I'm seeing Diabe Smart, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm seeing Low, and I'm seeing Protein Chef.
yeah.
Why do you have so many brands, and what is a parent company, and how is that structured?
So the parent brand is Low Foods, which is basically the holding brand, which stands for functional foods.
Okay.
Like I said, we are building for specific health conditions, right? So the products need to be designed very differently. Now, we had multiple ways in which we could approach this. We could take a mother brand and then just create lines within that. We could create a house of brand. There are various brand architectures that are there.
The reason for you is coming out now.
Sorry?
This formers.
Yeah. So we went through that process, and again, it's always a function of what life stage the brand is, and each life stage, you need to operate differently. But the core reason why we had to segregate the two brands, and this applies to people who are building it, that if you have a disconnect between two brands in terms of the approach that they do, then you don't want one to overlap with the other and create a disconnect for each of them individually.
Okay.
Let me just explain. For example, like I said, we have a diabetic brand and we have a protein brand, right?
So that's Protein
Chef and Diabe Smart. Right?
Diabe, okay.
Now the problem is that consumers have very limited mind space, right? I mean, it's not that your brand is the only brand they are encountering. So consumers will encounter your brand in various places. So if they start associating, I mean, for us, the risk was that if they start associating our Protein Chef brand with diabetes as a condition, two things happen. One is they think that this is a product for people who have a disease or who have a medical condition. It's a medical product for medical people.
Right.
And second is it's for older people, right? Because diabetes is typically 45 to 50. So somewhere the the 25 to 35 or 20, 20 to 40 people, they're also very particular about who, especially if you look at the new consumer, who they associate with I mean, as much as they are not brand loyalists, but they are identity loyalists, right? In the sense ki within the brand or within that identity, they look for multiple brands that meet their identity.
When you say identity, what do you mean?
It could be what they stand for, right? Or what values that they stand for. So even if they may not be brand loyal, but they will look at brands that stand for something, right? And that may span within the same category multiple brands, or multiple categories they look for the brand that says the same thing. And that's the nature of how brands have always been built, which is they tap into a segment, a TG, and and then the emotion that gets built is when you identify with the brand, right? And that's the core of any brand building. You can build a visibility, you can build an identity, but a brand connect happens when there is your own personal value system and identity gets logged in with the brand. That's how then emotion starts to get generated.
Right.
It moves from being a transactional relationship to an emotional relationship.
Got it.
And that only happens when an emotion only gets generated when there is a connect. The connect only gets generated when there is a story or there is a connection with the brand's story itself, because you are identifying with the story of the brand either as an individual or as a collective. And so that's really the way how brands get built in terms of the emotional connect. That's the ultimate for any brand, which is to have an emotional bond with the consumer, because then loyalty is assured and the consumer talks about you rather than you having to talk to the consumer.
Right.
So fundamentally, what we realized was to be able to not have a disconnect between the 20 to 40 age band or 20 to 35 age band with being associated with a medical or condition or with an older population. That's the reason we chose to segregate the two and treat them as two very independent brands. And which is why we have two brands, Protein Chef and DiabeSmart.
And Low as a brand?
So Low is the mother brand, which is more like a Britannia or an ITC or a Unilever.
Right. So what I'm seeing there is a low keto.
So Low is basically, and if you see Protein Chef is a sub-brand, so Low, this is a carton, so which is why you see this is bigger one. But if you see it in the actual packaging, it's the brand name that will stand out much larger.
So on the pack on top,
So if you see DiabeSmart is what will be recognized. Low Foods is there, but it's on the side. It's
correct.
So it's basically says Low Foods is the parent company.
Correct.
The brand that we are talking about here is the specific brand.
Right. But in the other one, the Keto Murukka, I see Low as the primary brand.
That's an old. We are changing our identity. So
Okay.
But if you look at it, Protein Chef now, by the time this episode gets launched, Protein Chef will come in now as an independent brand. Low Foods will become even more further up. So it will become center stage.
And why is that? Why are you doing that?
Because we realized that people are now connecting with the core. So Low Foods was the older brand and Protein Chef was a new brand. So which is why we started with having Low Food endorse Protein Chef.
Got it.
Now Protein Chef has become a very, very large entity and a brand that's recognized by itself. The name itself is recognized.
So it doesn't need to be.
So it doesn't need to be endorsed
by Low Foods.
It doesn't need that endorser. That's what I meant, that each life stage, the brand has to evolve. Otherwise, you don't stay relevant, right? Because then otherwise people will start to then get confused at whether it's Low Foods or Protein Chef. So you also, as a brand owner, need to know that when does the brand need to evolve into the next level.
And how did you decide that now is the time? Like what?
I think the biggest tipping point is that the number of searches for Protein Chef now far exceeds the number of searches for Low Foods.
On what? Searches?
On quick commerce on Google. And that's very evident that people are now recognizing and calling out by Protein Chef and not as Low Foods, which actually was the purpose always, right? Which was we wanted to eventually make them into standalone brands. But we started off because we were in the journey, they were new brands. So we said, okay, let's give them an endorser architecture. But then now the endorser doesn't need to be there. And in fact, this now becomes the kid has grown up.
So does DiabeSmart also get that same level of?
DiabeSmart is still in the process of getting there. So
you see it getting standalone?
Absolutely. If you look at DiabeSmart, it has its own social media handle, its own website. So it is today treated internally, but the endorser still remains. Eventually, it will become a standalone piece.
Got it. I will come back to some of this, but you have also gone from producing products like these into cloud kitchens.
Yes.
Why? Very simple and straightforward why. I have follow-ups on that, but...
So you know what, this whole packaged food plus cloud kitchen as a model, we lost a lot of investors because of that for the first 3 or 4 years.
When you shifted to cloud or when you decided?
Yeah, we launched cloud kitchens in the first 1.5 years after we launched. We started up as a package. Yeah, during COVID. So early days of COVID. So we already had packaged food and we switched over to, we also started cloud kitchens. Again, story behind that is that the Swiggy founders were using our products and they wanted something to come to them very quickly. We were in HSR, they were in HSR, so they said, I'll just set you up as a restaurant. That's how
So they didn't want to buy your atta.
yeah, they bought it, came after 2-3 days. They said, yeah, I'll just set you up. And then that's how it happened. But anyways, that's...
so that is in a sense a natural evolution, right? You're creating the product that anyway would have...
It didn't... for me, it was a natural evolution because again, what was happening was... see, again, this is how you have to understand the consumer part, and an investor may not always understand that part. And which is why if an investor says this is a bad idea, don't just assume they got it right. You know your consumer the best, you know your industry the best, especially in evolving industries. And, you know, every single investor would say you are just doing too many things. This doesn't make sense. Cloud kitchen is a different animal. Packaged food is a different animal. You're trying to run the two things together. Doesn't make sense. This is a bad idea. We lost multiple investors because of that.
You're talking about angels here or
institutional investors as well. Right? Because, and absolutely understand why they said that, because they've invested in cloud kitchen businesses separately, they've invested in packaged food separately. They understand that the way to work these two things are very different. One team doing both the things doesn't make sense.
Sorry, right? Sorry. And when you say you lost investors, do you mean
they would say that to them, we like the business, we like the brand, but you're doing too many, you know, the fact that you're running these two verticals simultaneously, you know, we're not sure if that's a good idea. So
this is when you're pitching to them for funding.
Yeah.
And so, existing investors, what was their reaction?
But again, it's a self-selection, right? Some people understood that this makes a lot of sense. That's why I'm saying all investors are, you know, each investor has a different thesis approach, right? And that's why, you know, it's automatically a self-selection bias because self-selection, because the investors who got it, this thought it makes a lot of sense. Many investors, and especially the larger ones, for them it was like two businesses. They were looking at it from a business angle. We were a lot more at the core, at the consumer side, and we realized that this is an evolving category.
Right.
So for an evolving category, a packaged food is only one occasion, right? But you know, if you give them a fully prepared end product, what I would call an experience of the final end product.
Yeah.
They have a very different experience. They look at the brand and the product very differently. See, in a sampling, you can go and do a trial of a chocolate or a cookie, and people will say, "हाँ, ये अच्छा नहीं है," and they'll buy it, right? You can't do that with atta. You can't say atta taste karo and ये atta तो बहुत अच्छा है, right? You have to give an end product, right? And end product for a new brand in staples is very tough. So which is why he said, look, people are anyways taking atta at home or bread at home and making sandwiches out of it or roti or paratha out of it. I might as well start doing that and showcase to them a final product. And that's how we started to do that. The other thing that happened, again, come back to the quick commerce analogy, is in packaged food, distribution was not built out, right? But in fresh food, Swiggy and Zomato already had built out distribution.
Right.
That was a fundamental difference. So again, I was not building a cookie company, right? I was not building a protein bar company. I was building a company that solves for diabetes or that solves for carbohydrates, that solves for protein. So for me, if I have to solve for it, I have to go for all the channels and all the consumption occasions. And so I said, look, if he's seeking out a low carb product or he's seeking out a high protein product, I need to offer him that when he's eating out or ordering in as well.
Right.
And that's how they will experience the end product also.
So primarily from a discovery perspective.
Discovery perspective, because the channel was already built out, and that's why that became the largest part of our business very rapidly. Because we knew our product was always great. We didn't have the distribution. Swiggy Zomato offered us distribution in the cloud kitchen world. We built out the same proposition, same brand, same delivery, same brand, same proposition.
Right.
Proposition doesn't change.
Right.
But it did so well, and that gave us conviction that fundamentally our product is right. It's just that we don't have distribution on the packaged food side yet. Quick commerce came, that also happened, and that's why we are where we are today. Right?
Got it.
And today, in retrospect, people are calling it strategy. In fact, now everyone is doing the same thing, right? And if you see ITC, right, Ashirvad, MasterChef, Sunfeast, and that's exactly the core thing that we were working on, which is the fact that consumers will experience you as an end product also, not just as a initial product. That was a core premise, and that drives trial and eventually repeat. And that was a insight that we worked with. And today, thankfully a lot of brands are getting into it. In fact, I see even more newer brands, packaged food brands. Godesi has just launched cloud kitchens as well. So that makes a lot of sense. I think we could see that that synergy would add value rather than subtract.
So I also noticed that when you're typing these words, low carb, keto, protein,
Yeah.
you guys show up
Yes.
right at the very top, right?
And that is the single biggest reason why we've survived for 5 years. So we never had the large money or the advertising spends, but I think we played the game extremely, extremely smartly on the discoverability side.
Also,
All the keywords. So even today, every single title of every single product, I myself write the titles of every single product because these are all algorithmic. These marketplaces are all algorithms, right? And I think you have to leverage the consumer side searches, the algorithm's own ranking algorithm, the marketplace's ranking algorithm, and then your own product, what it stands for, and then finally what the consumer needs to hear to be able to buy the product. You said the algorithmic, it's not an SEO thing, right? So I think it's very critical, but if you get it right, your cost of acquisition ends up being very less. And which is why you end up organically appearing in a lot of the searches.
so there's no cost to appearing.
No, so there is some bit of advertising, but the advertising cost comes down dramatically because you are by default also appearing organically in a lot of these things.
So that advertising you're talking about is distinct from appearing organically, right?
Both, yes, yeah. But the more you appear organically, the less you need to spend on advertising, right?
And so what I was asking is this, so there's no cost for you in appearing organically.
Absolutely not. But that's what you want to So if you know 10 years back, the whole Google ka search engine optimization, right? That was, what was that? That was in a sense organizing your website in a manner so that Google starts to rank you higher and higher. The moment you start ranking higher and higher, your traffic shoots up and the cost of acquiring the traffic comes down dramatically, right? And that's really fundamentally, if you look at it, 70 to 80% of all these marketplaces, even today, except Big Basket, operate on search driven. So 70 to 80% of the entire product discovery happens through search. So fundamentally, if you really are able to optimize on search very well, then your cost of advertising comes down. The single biggest cost head for D2C brands is customer acquisition cost, the CAC, right? Our CAC has been always at ridiculously low levels, and that's because of a combination of multiple ways in which we optimize. And I think that's the single biggest reason why we've survived for so long, because we've always, I think in our lifetime, even with growth, we've never grown. 15 to 20% is the max that we have spent on advertising as a percentage of revenue. Which usually is unheard of because usually D2C brands, small scale, you will end up spending a large part of the revenue at least in initial days and then work for it to do that. In our case, we've managed to, I think, in our 5-6 years of existence, never gone beyond that. And that's probably the reason why we were able to always conserve cash and be able to survive long enough to raise the next round and also be able to rank at the place where the intent is the highest. And when the intent and the brand connect, the recall for the brand also shoots up. So, which is why we've always been very search focused in terms of our approach.
And is this the same for the restaurant discovery as well as quick commerce? Because right now you're relying quite heavily on quick commerce for acquisition, right?
Absolutely. In fact, see, in Amazon, on Google, all the big brands have got A teams working on optimizing.
Yeah.
Even on Amazon, you have absolute A teams working on optimizing every keyword, every word.
Right.
Interestingly, on Swiggy and Zomato, right? Who's your competition? It's mostly all these restaurants, individual restaurants. The organized players are very few and far between, right? I mean, you have a Rebel, you have a Cure Foods or whatever, but very few and far between. But 98% of your competition is unorganized players who obviously are more focused on cooking the food rather than optimizing on algorithm.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we brought the same same intelligence of Google and Amazon onto Swiggy Zomato. And that's, I think, the reason why we really survived and flourished on Swiggy Zomato so well. Even today, if you see, I think our level of optimization is far ahead, and we brought the same intelligence to quick commerce, and which is why even on quick commerce today, everyone says that quick commerce bleeds you and the cost of advertising is so high. Even till date, our cost of advertising average on quick commerce never exceeds 20% on, usually it operates between 15 to 20%.
Okay.
The reason for that is we are very, 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 very anal about how we approach this entire, keyword, title, all of that. And that's something that I think cannot be given to a catalog agency. The founder or the brand person absolutely has to, in fact, I would say the revenue, and I own the revenue in that sense. They are the ones who will decide that part.
Got it. You mentioned that in 2023, I think, you failed miserably on quick commerce.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah.
What have you changed? Because you said right now you're doing really well on quick commerce. Well, what changed?
I think, see, again, the same thing is you have to understand distribution is critical. And each distribution channel, both the dynamics and economics is very different for each channel, right?
Okay.
Economics purely in terms of the unit economics of that channel, at what price point, what unit economics works. And dynamics in terms of how the consumer approaches the channel for purchase.
Okay.
Right? So what happened in 2023 was Amazon was our primary channel, e-commerce. And then we just took the same products as it is and placed them in quick commerce. And that completely tanked. And the reason for that is because at Amazon and e-commerce in general, see, e-commerce is very food unfriendly. So if you look at the whole e-commerce boom, while everything from fashion to cosmetics to electronics did exceedingly well, right? Food as a category never really took off. You had a few brands, but really you didn't have the proliferation of brands because food fundamentally operates at a 50, when you want to try a product, right? If you know that 5 rupee pack, 10 rupee pack, 20 rupee pack, right? That is really the way at which you enter a food category, right? If you see, which is why if you see the traditional food brands, they all will have that 5 rupee, 10 rupee pack.
Yeah.
And then they'll have the 200 gram pack or a 1 kg pack, which will be at 100 rupees or 150 rupees. But trial always, food is a very impulse and trial driven. First trial.
True.
Now you can't do a trial at 500 rupees, right? For a food. You may do that for a cosmetic or because that's the price point at which the category operates. But you can't do that in food. And that's where I think we took but you cannot sell under 500 rupees on e-commerce. Otherwise, it's unviable because the cost of logistics is on an average between 70 to 90 rupees.
Okay.
So which is why if you want to sell a 70 to a 90 rupee product, you can't sell it, right? Because the cost of shipping itself is 70 to 90. So which is why you end up selling the same thing at least for a 400. So you'll sell a large pack or a multi-pack. Right? And that is not good for people who want to try it out as an impulse thing.
So you realize that quick commerce?
So we brought the same 300 rupee, 500 rupee SKU and put it on quick commerce. And quick commerce pay, people are completing their cart. The average time from app opening to transaction payment closure is 2.5 minutes on quick commerce. Average time. So consumer is not here to explore. That's what happens.
E-commerce, it's more of an exploration.
That's by nature because people are searching for it. They're researching, right? That's the search and research is the core thing on how Amazon operates.
Right.
That's why their core philosophy is, Amazon's core philosophy is the largest selection on the planet, right? Because the whole premise is whatever you're thinking should be available. Quick commerce is absolutely opposite. Consumers, and that's a core, again, a basic behavioral psychology, right? The more options you give, the more analysis paralysis happens, right? Consumers, so you want to give options but still limit the options. So that the consumer's decision making, when he's trying to make a decision quickly, you want to give very limited options. But you want to give options because the consumers don't want to feel that I was forced to buy this. But you don't want to give them so many that they get confused and move away, right? Because decision is a very big cognitive overload on consumers. So which is why you want, so quick commerce by default will give you limited selection. And then we redid our entire selection with the pricing, with the grammage, with the packaging such that it goes in the 20, 50, 90 rupee price point.
Got it.
And because the consumer there is looking to just quickly transact, he's okay to say, okay, you know what, I'll add a 50 rupee product.
Right.
It sounds interesting, right? Or as is most often the case, to complete his cart. Because they usually, quick commerce behavior is built around refill or, so you're out of stock on something, you just want to quickly refill. It's not a planned purchase. So you just say, okay, I bought this 150 rupee product. and then you realize कि यार 200 rupees I need to, otherwise I'll get charged. So you say, okay, यार, let me
No
try
one
this.
wants to pay for delivery.
No one wants to pay, right? I mean, then you say, okay, look, you know what, I'll try this new thing out. It sounds interesting. So that is why you have to work with a very different pricing strategy on quick commerce.
But you figure that out as soon as you started failing on quick commerce? Or
No,
did
no,
you like-
we failed, got out of it. Rather kicked out of quick commerce because all these guys said, look, your product is not selling and you have to be, I mean, you can say whatever you say, but in the end, you have to accept the market feedback, right? But the good part again is ki irrationality. And, we said ki yaar, there's nothing wrong with us. I mean, there's something has to be off in the way we executed, right? And that's it. Then we looked at it and then we realized that, we needed to change everything from packaging to pricing to grammage uh, to even the titles. Like, for example, Amazon gives you 5 bullet points and like 250 characters. Blinkit gives you 60 characters.
Oh,
So you have to just rethink the entire thing from scratch.
right.
So I think we just rethought the entire thing from scratch, and that's where we saw the success.
Got it. I think I have one final question for you. I noticed this LinkedIn post of yours where I think it was LinkedIn where you said the chutney theory.
Acha.
Right? One, I want you to explain what is this chutney theory of yours
Yeah.
and what is the chutney for low foods?
So the chutney theory, as it's being called now, is actually something PC Mustafa, who's the founder of ID Foods. ID Foods is a brand that I absolutely completely respect. I think it's the OG in terms of consumer brands and the way it should be built in India. Funded consumer brand, and PC Mustafa. I don't know if you've interacted with him or not. Mind blowing as a founder, as a mentor, as an advisor. So he's a mentor and advisor to us. So when I was talking to him in one of our conversations, he said that every business has a chutney in it, and the way he defined was ki if you go to a South Indian restaurant, right? You in the menu, the chutney is not the price. What is price is one idli, yeah, one dosa.
Yeah.
Right now, if you look at idli is made of rice flour basically. Right? Idli is probably the cheapest thing for them to produce. It's steamed. It doesn't even use oil, right? So there's the cogs and the raw material cost is like literally running into paise at scale. But the chutney is made of coconut. It's fat. It's the most expensive ingredient that they have, raw material and the product that they have. But they cannot charge for it. You try charging that, in a Darshini or in a South Indian restaurant, go and, you tell a waiter, I need more chutney, and he says, sir, take out 50 rupees, you just walk out in disgust, right? I mean, that is what is fundamentally. So, in the end, ironically, the thing that you charge for is the cheapest thing, and the thing that you cannot charge for, not don't charge for, you cannot charge for, is the most expensive part of your business, right?
Okay.
But again, one drives the other, and you think about it. There's a concept called loss leader in many industries. In fact, in Asian paints and paints, we used to have, there is this distemper paint called tractor distemper.
Okay.
It was the single product on which all price comparisons were based.
Okay.
So people and the dealers would sell it at the loss because they wanted the consumer to come in, and then they would make money off the everything else that they were selling. So I think that concept, obviously, similar concept of a loss leader, but in a different form where you cannot even charge for the loss leader. The loss leader is invisible. In that case, at least you were charging for a product where, but at a loss. But here you cannot even charge for the product. So that erodes profitability, right? And unless you are very cognizant about why that product exists and very cognizant about the fact that it is core to the overall consumer experience and hence it needs to be retained. Without that, and without that, the core consumer experience will break down. You bring a finance or a CFO, they will say, no, this is, or a consultant, and they'll give you a nice presentation on the breakup of the cost structure and say, no, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But you as a brand owner or the founder need to know that, no, this is core to deliver a great experience for the consumer. And I think that's really the core of this entire thing, that, you have to be cognizant about it.
Right.
You cannot do anything about it. In other cases, you can still shave off costs, but here you cannot do that. And if you try to compromise on the quality of that, it will impact your overall experience. So being cognizant and being knowing the difference between what is a chutney and what is a loss leader, so to speak, is important because it erodes your profitability. And that's something that you should be, as any business leader should be cognizant about. And by the way, it doesn't apply to just businesses, it applies to each function. Like a marketing function has the equivalent of a chutney. A distribution function has the equivalent of that, right? For example, here, these boxes, I could have cartons that are cheaper quality cartons, right? But the risk that I run is that, and this is in the back end, not consumer facing, but the risk that I run is the product will get damaged. And eventually that damaged product is what will reach the consumer, right? So while there is no, I could reduce 10 rupees from these cartons, but that might impact the eventual product experience for the consumer. And for a growing brand that is built on consumer experience, you don't want that to happen.
Thank you so much for doing this with us, Sudarshan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Build from Scratch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me over, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.